Smart cities are quickly becoming a critical necessity due to the confluence of urbanization, greater pressure on the successful management of a city due to a rising population and climate change. The concept of smart cities is far from a flash in the pan. According to Transparency Market Research, the global smart cities market is growing at 14% a year at present and is expected to reach a value of about $1.3 trillion by 2019. The benefits of smart cities are wide-ranging, affecting a broad spectrum of industries and making it life easier for residents in a multitude of ways. The example of healthcare sector comes to mind. Local and provincial hospitals currently deliver services in isolation, and patient records are not mutually accessible. Yet, in a smart city with integrated systems, standardized records will be available regardless of which hospital the patient visits. And this process will provide better service to the patient and more accurate national health information to the relevant authorities. To discuss the concept of smart cities, I'm joined by Mpumi Nhlapo, Director of Intervate, who's with us here on our program. Mpumi, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's quite a mouthful, a lot of concepts. I'm thinking not only is it healthcare that it gets affected, there's emergency services that can be integrated, there's also policing, safety, and so on. A whole number of things, right? But to your mind, I mean, is there an example that comes to mind that where you've seen smart city concept work perfectly?
So I wouldn't say perfectly, I think, because naturally cities are fluent environments, but I think where you're seeing significant investment happening is around the transport space.
Yeah.
So globally, transport is a big enabler of development in cities. And so getting efficient transport systems working linked to technology becomes a key enabler of that development. From our perspective, we've started working very closely in Johannesburg specifically with the Roads Agency and the Department of Transport around solutions that can help them in terms of addressing the transport challenge, public transport challenge.
So how would an integrated transport system work, for instance, in terms of the smart cities concept?
Okay, so I think what's important from a transport point of view is a system that sees, the citizen from the way they start their journey right through that process. Now, you would know in a large metro, such as Johannesburg, people are traveling between metros. So you could be traveling from Soweto, for example, to somewhere in Guruleni for work or to Pretoria. So a smart transport system should see you and enable you to travel through the different modes of transport.
Right.
So from a mass carrier like train into a smaller type of environment like a bus, right through to the taxis and then to the end point.
So then that's where you'll be talking about things like integrated ticketing solutions, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So really it's about the concept of having a single card or ticketing system that can see you right through that journey. But more importantly, it's about being able to plan your route through those different modes from a single interface. And that's part of the work that we're starting to develop right now.
And in South Africa, Joburg is already adopting these technologies?
Absolutely. So I think, it's an evolving process. I think, you've got different players, as I've said, different metros, different owners of these transport systems. But I think the trend is for them to digitize themselves first.
Yeah.
And then as that digitization is happening, they'll then start to bring their systems together and integrate them. Okay.
But do you see in the value chain of transport, for instance, a section where the role players that should come to the party not come into the party? I'm sure it must be a lot of effort to educate, if you will, and inform some of the role players in the provision of transport.
Yes, I think, I wouldn't say they're not coming to the party. I think it's about prioritization, because when you think about building an integrated transport system, you need to have the infrastructure to start with that will cater for it. So the roads, the bus stations, the train stations, etc. And then you'd need then to have the technology that can enable that kind of that transport to function, that system to function efficiently. So I wouldn't say the role players are not participating. I'd say that they're different stages of development, depending where you are.
And obviously huge amounts of investments that have got to be made here. I mean, we're talking $1.9 trillion. That's a huge amount of money.
Absolutely.
So who in the context of Joburg or South Africa do you think should bear the costs of introducing these new technologies?
So let me take it more broadly and talk about a smart city.
Yeah.
I think it comes from different angles. So you've got in one area your smart utilities, so water and energy. And that's a space that we also play in. Then you've also got on the other end the space of transport, healthcare, and then safety. So I would suggest that the organizations or entities that are responsible for those areas should be looking at technology as a key enabler, because what we've seen in sectors such as telecoms is that through technology you can actually jump a lot of hoops in the process. So there was a shortage in terms of landlines in Africa, and a lot of countries didn't even adopt landlines. They went straight to mobile, and there's been huge advantages for that. So what we try to suggest is that by adopting technology earlier, you can actually jump a lot of loops in the process. You know? What we're inclined to do is to look at what some of the European nations are doing, and I'm not saying they're not doing good things, but in certain cases, it's a legacy approach. It's an old approach to addressing the problem. Where we should look is for innovation from our own country, because we understand our own challenges, from our own continent for that matter, and see how we can not even have to go through some of the challenges that they went through from a technology adoption perspective.
So you're talking about some of the customized solutions that have got to be adopted, given the experience on the continent and locally. Have you come across such? I know that in Kenya in particular, there's a lot of excitement about stuff that's coming out of there and other parts of East Africa. Have you identified a few solutions that you think are adaptable to South African conditions?
Absolutely. So let me talk to what's actually coming out of South Africa itself from that perspective. So we worked with the Johannesburg Roads Agency a couple of years back, and even now currently developing the Find and Fix app, which is effectively allowed people in our cities to report. Initially it was potholes, but now it's grown to being able to report other infrastructure challenges or issues, traffic lights, bridges, etc., that are happening in the communities. So what you're doing there is that you're empowering the citizen to have a voice in terms of things that are happening within their communities, things that are happening in their environments. And that concept now has actually grown where we've developed now a further iteration of that particular app, which is called Community First, or Community Safety. And really it's about being able to log issues around safety, etc. in the community.
And your company is involved in
Absolutely.
that?
So we've partnered with Johannesburg Roads Agency, and we help them from a technology perspective.
And it's working pretty well?
Yes, absolutely. So when we first launched it, I think we had about 12,000 issues logged within the first couple of months, a couple of years back. And it's there's constantly cases being logged now. We're in the process of developing it further. So there's things in there like the ability for it to check the quality of the road just by using the technology on the phone to see how bumpy the ride is. So things like that we're starting to introduce into the app as well to really make it
And probably will help with design as well, of the same infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And the quality control thereof overall.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the simple things are we're starting to have a view of where the majority of issues are. And also if I know that an issue has been logged here, and while I'm going to service that issue, I can see that there's 2 or 3 other issues close to there. I may as well resolve those. So it becomes a bit more efficient in terms of the city as well, addressing those infrastructure challenges.
Given that type of experience that you've had, and the fact that you work with some of the big companies in South Africa, your Escoms and Transnet, I'm sure with the development of such solutions, you've been able to deal with a whole number of their problems.
Yes, I mean, ours is to assist them to understand the magnitude of the problem, to assist them to address some of the challenges. And as I said, these things are work in progress in many cases. It's not that you fix the problem and it ends there. I think you identify one problem and then you look to then partner over the long term to address the issues over time.
Well, just give me a scenario where this way of thinking, including the introduction of such solutions as the one that you've spoken about, how they would change, let's say, a city of Johannesburg. Obviously, you've got to imagine those scenarios as you go forward, right? You can't develop or create out of nothing. So paint that smart city for me on the back of your own development and innovation.
Okay, so one of the big challenges we have today is around water and electricity. Let me talk about electricity and the ability to measure the consumption from users, right? So, and the challenge that we've got legacy infrastructure that's in place, and how do we make that smart? Right, so we've developed technologies that allows us to automatically read those meters, called a smart metering solution. And then on the back end, we're able to get those readings automatically and tell people how much they've consumed, what they consumed, on which day, etc. So if you think about currently that those meters are read manually, now all of a sudden you can get all of that data electronically. It creates the opportunity then for more intelligent work to be done by those consultants, as opposed to just reading a meter. They could actually manage consumption. They could manage, all the pressures we have on our electricity grid today, for example.
Right? And water as well.
And the same thing for water, exactly. So so now we're saying that we can move from manual systems that have a lot of inaccuracies, a lot of errors, create a lot of frustration, things that you see in the headlines, to automate it so that those things now become things of the past.
And solve the billing problems, and of course pay electronically, and all of those things.
And also allow you to manage your own consumption proactively.
Sure. Well, Mpumi Nhlapo, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate everything of the best, and it's great to learn that you guys are creating developing new solutions anyway, and adding to solving our problems. We appreciate it. All right, and that's our technology for you, innovation here in Johannesburg.